Hey, Ruan here from TunnelvizionTV, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to create clean renders in Modo. Now before we start, I just want to say I'm not a Modo rendering expert, so these are just a few tweaks that I found and that's working for me to remove some of the noise in your Modo renders. So let's just quickly go over the scene. I've got a teapot, as you can see, and I've got a floor, and then obviously a camera, and then I created an area light, just one area light off to the side. And if we quickly look at my materials, so I created a material for the teapot, and that's set to 50% specular and 5% roughness. And then the same thing for the floor material, I set that to 50% specular and 5% roughness. And everything is close to default settings. I actually lowered some of the render settings, but I will show you that as we go along, just so that you can see the difference on YouTube, because obviously YouTube will compress the footage and hopefully you can see the difference. But let's do a quick render with the default settings and let's see what we have. Okay, so that's our render with the default Modo settings. And as you can see, we've got some very ugly noise in the reflection here on the floor, some noise in the reflection areas on the teapot itself. And then if you look at the shadows, also very noisy. I'm just going to zoom in a bit, say 400%. So let's look at the reflection on the teapot. Very noisy around the edges. You get these bright little dots. Same with the reflection on the floor, actually a bit worse, a lot of these little speckles around it. And then if we go over to the shadow, you can see the shadow is also pretty noisy. So let's just zoom out here quickly and let's look at the shadow area first. Let's see how easy it is to resolve the noise or to remove some of the noise in the shadows. So I'm just going to close this. And really simple, I'm going to go to my render settings, and then I'm going to go to the settings tab on the side, and then go down to your light samples. Now I think this is usually on 64 if you open Modo. I just lowered it a little bit to 16 so that you can see the difference. So I'm going to set this to, let's set it to 512. Now you can set this to higher values. You can set it to 256 if you want to save a bit of rendering time, or if you don't mind that your render is going to take a bit longer, you can set this to 2000 or 4000. But I'm going to set mine to 512, and then I'm going to press render again, and let's see what we have. Right, so our render is finished. Let's quickly compare it to our first render. So there was the first render, and this is our new render. Now if we zoom in here, let's go to 400% again, and let's look at our shadow. So that's our new shadow with a new render, and this is our first render, and hopefully you can see it's a huge difference just by changing that one setting. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So let's close that quickly. And yeah, so that's the setting, the light samples under your render settings, and then settings here on the side. Very quickly to get that noise out of your shadows. Now let's go and see if we can do something to these reflections on the floor. So I'm going to go into my floor material, and then you will see something that's called reflection rays. Okay, currently this is set to 16. I think the default's also 64, but for the tutorial purposes, just to show you guys the difference, I lowered it to 16, and now I'm going to increase this one as well to 512. Okay, that's only for the floor, only on the floor material. Let's hit render and see what we get. Okay, let's look at the difference. So if we look at our first render, you can see a lot of noise here in the reflections on the floor. And if we look at the latest render, you can see it's much cleaner. So let's quickly go to 400% and just zoom in here a bit. So that's our new render, that's our first render, big difference. Okay, so let's just zoom out again. And lastly, let's try and fix these noise in the reflection on the actual teapot. So I'm going to close that down, and I'm going to go to my teapot material settings, and I'm going to change the reflection rays to 512 and then render again. Okay, so this render is done, and as you can see, we've got some nice clean reflections on the teapot itself, and clean reflections on the floor, and nice clean shadow as well. So let's quickly compare that to our first render. You can see we've got all the noise here in the reflection area, and also very noisy shadows. And if we look at our latest one, big difference. Now obviously this will increase your render time, but usually if you want to get rid of some noise, you need to sacrifice time. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial. Give me a thumbs up if you did. And remember, I bring out new tutorials every week, so if you want to, you don't have to. Click on that subscribe button and you'll be notified of new tutorials every week. Thanks a lot for watching.